My husband, 38, won't accept our gay son. Last month my son 16 came out to us as gay. I, 36, already kind of had a feeling, call it mother's intuition if you will, and was not at all surprised when my son came out. My husband and I both grew up in religious households, but when we had children, we never wanted to force anything onto them. We both agreed that we would raise them as best as we could, and if they chose not to believe in God, we would love them just as much as if they did. We married young and our eldest was born when I was 20. We had always wanted a decently big family and are so grateful for our 3 boys. Today I fucked up a boys and baby girl. However, last month, the dynamics of our perfect family broke apart. My son had been so nervous for a while before he told us, and then when restaurants reopened, he begged us to take him out alone, without his siblings. He looked desperate, so we both agreed and my mother babysat for us. We arrived and I just had a feeling I knew what he was going to say. And when the food arrived, he finally said it, "Mum, Dad, I'm gay." I held his hand and told him that I loved him. We both did, and he will always be our son. From hindsight, I now realize my husband was being unusually quiet, but at the time I was so elated and my son looked so relieved. When we got back home that evening, my husband went straight upstairs. I assumed he went to the bathroom, but when he came down, he had a suitcase. He grabbed my son and dragged him along with suitcase, out of the house. I ran after them, of course. My husband called him names, and pushed him onto his drive. He basically threw my son out. I was pissed. I had no reason to believe my husband would react this way. We have friends who are openly gay and talk to many people at our church who are too. I don't understand how his son being openly gay is a problem for him. I was so pissed, I stood between them and told my husband to respect his son for who he is. Now, he's never been a violent man, but for the first time in the 17 years we've been married, I saw him as violent. He hit my son. I was so angry, I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave right now. He left the house angrily, drove away. He has been staying with his brother since. I love my husband and my son. I want them both to be happy, but my son is 16. He can't live without his parents' help. My husband can. I chose my son over my husband. Does that make me a bad person? Probably. But the moment he hit my son, he lost all my respect. I don't think I could ever look at him the same way. He hit our son, that's not okay. I'll always love my son, no matter what he chooses to do with his life. Why can't my husband just accept him for who he is? If he's okay with these strangers being openly gay, why can't his son? Now my son blames himself for me being upset with his father. I keep telling him it's not his fault, but it doesn't help that whenever their father does come home, he poisons our other children's minds to think it is their older brother's fault. I just want my family to be peaceful again, but my husband is refusing to talk to me for as long as I defend my son. Last week, he suggested a divorce. I love my husband so much, but if he doesn't accept my son and apologize for hurting him, I don't think I could stay married to him. Every time I see him, I'm just reminded of that moment when his fist hit my son's face, and it makes me so angry and upset. My mother has suggested we go to couples therapy, but I see no point if his father is too stubborn to accept his son for who he is. Is it even worth it to stay married if all I remember is him harming my son? Clarifications and, kind of, an update. I didn't want to express the language my husband used against my son as it was very insensitive and offensive. I didn't think it would be appropriate to write them out. Me and my children are staying with my parents at the moment. Husband keeps showing up at the house and son experiences major panic attacks when he does. When I commented I would suggest therapy, I meant for him to go alone so he could work out his issues. I'm looking into some family therapists, LGBT-friendly therapists, etc. It is quite difficult to find some in these trying times, but I have found a couple who seem good. Also, I think the one thing most people were concerned about was to charge my husband for assault. I did take pictures of the injuries and was ready to go to the police, but my son begged me not to. This whole thing has clearly shaken him up and he's scared his dad will hate him even more. Even my parents have been trying to stop me from making such a spectacle of it, but I do agree some action should be taken. I'm just trying to remind my son that his father should be penalized for hitting him, and that it's not okay, ever, for someone to hit their children. It's currently 9:30 AM where I live and my husband has responded by telling me that he refuses to meet with me and that I should contact him via a lawyer now. Yes, I am heartbroken that my husband wants to divorce me because those feelings have been there for 17 plus years. It's hard for them to just go overnight. But I do think divorce is the best option for us. He put up a facade our whole marriage. He kind of broke my trust. I don't know if I could ever allow him back in the home. It would be at the risk of harming me and my children, and he could be lying to me again. I would hate it if one day I woke up to my son not speaking to me because I chose his abusive father over him. I don't think it's worth it. He doesn't want to be mature and at least have a conversation with me about it. He's really changed from the man I knew him to be, and I honestly don't know how to deal with that. It's very difficult to know the man you've devoted so much of your life to has been pretending to be someone he's not. I have been in contact with a couple of divorce lawyers from my area. My cousin is a solicitor and even thought divorce isn't her specialty. She was able to find me some of the best from my area. Also, my plan for today is to sit all my children down and have a long talk about why mum and dad are divorcing, and that none of them are to blame, especially my eldest. I'll tell them that their father did something intolerable by hitting their older brother and expressing such aggressive behavior in front of them. I'm also going to ask them what their father has been saying to them, and recording it. I'm just really lucky I have a decent job and make a stable income during this pandemic, otherwise I would be screwed right now. Even though husband was the breadwinner, I don't make too far off from what he does. Full update. Me and my children have been doing online therapy sessions according to COVID guidelines and it has been going great so far. My son has come around to getting his father charged for battery. Maybe even ABH is possible according to my lawyer. He's also realizing that nothing was his fault. The blame lies entirely on his father. We're also in the middle of a divorce. He's trying to get custody of my daughter, but my lawyer told me it's very unlikely he'll be given custody for any of my children. I've cut all contact with him. We only speak about the divorce through lawyers, etc. I'm also looking for houses in the area. We collectively agreed as a family it was better to move on from that house that's been tainted with bad memories. I've made their schools aware of what is happening and told them that if their father tries to pick them up from school/college, to call me instantly. Thank you everyone for being so kind and supportive. I really have appreciated all the advice and stories that have been shared with me. I was also gonna say, in the US, you can't legally kick your kid out of the house until they're 18. He can call CPS on your pos dad. Yeah, what a homophobic asshole. You can't act like this and then claim to be Christian. Or a father. Jesus would have accepted your son the way he is. Be more like that. Not from the US, but we'll definitely look into that, thank you. If he's okay with these strangers being openly gay, why can't his son? He's not okay with them being gay, but it doesn't affect his life and he can ignore it when it's not that close to him. Your husband abused your son verbally and physically. Read that over and over until it truly sinks in. He believes that his son is at fault for something he can't control. You, choosing to stick by your son, who did nothing wrong, who gathered an enormous amount of courage to come out. You're a parent. Your husband forfeited the right to call himself one the moment he abused his son. You are a fucking amazing mother. It's understandable that you have love for your husband despite everything. You've known the best sides of him for years. But you can't judge a relationship on just the highs. You have to factor in what your partner is like at their worst, and your husband has shown you where he stands. Your family will not go back to what it was if your husband is allowed near your children at the moment. Until he has gone to individual therapy, done an enormous amount of introspection and then thoroughly, genuinely and truly apologizes to your son and the rest of the kids, he is not fit to be there. Personally, I take the divorce. I take that bullet for my kid because no child should ever have to grow into adulthood knowing that their parent thinks of them as lesser. Your son is, at the very least, going to need therapy as well to deal with his trauma. And I'd honestly recommend the same for you. Please, take time away from your husband and imagine this story being told to you by a friend. What would you advise? How would you look at this if it wasn't your life? Edit after the update. I am so immensely, immeasurably fucking proud of you. You are the kind of mother every child needs. I am sorry for the hurt you're experiencing, the hurt your kids are going through, but I want you to know that you are worth your weight in gold. You are an amazing mother, an outstanding human being. Send all my love from across the internet. I chose my son over my husband. Does that make me a bad person? No, quite the opposite really. You protected your son from your violent husband. That makes you a great person and an amazing mother. Find a good lawyer, and a good therapist for you and your kids as a family and your son as an individual. It is never worth it to stay married to someone who would harm your child for any reason. I had a violent and abusive father. The worst parts were my mom taking his side and blaming me for the things. One of the moments that I remember the most was when my father tried to kill me by choking me. I kicked him and run away. Stay 2 weeks at my aunt's house. My mom didn't show up. She just sent me a text saying, "Why you make your father so angry?" I struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts. It took me years of therapy and pills to being able to not think suicide is okay. I'm better now that, in therapy, I learned that is not my fault. I didn't choose anything that happened to me. So, you are the best mom. Be proud that you were strong enough to stand up to your husband, even scared of him. Your son will see that and love you for it. My husband's 38M actions towards his daughters, 16F, abuse is bothering me, 34F. My stepdaughter confided to us that her grandfather, my Phil, has been sexually abusing her for years. I was home alone with my daughter yesterday. Somehow the conversation of whether she was going to report the abuse came up. I encouraged her to talk to a therapist who will help her. I told my husband after he came home and his reaction wasn't the best. He was mad at me for pushing her to go to the police or even see a therapist. He said his grandfather is still his dad and that he's remorseful as is. Apparently, he is still going to be in contact with his dad. Am I right to be upset and ultimately thinking about divorce? Please, as a victim of abuse, call out his shitty behavior if it's in front of her. She is the victim. She matters most. He said his grandfather is still his dad. Is his daughter not still his daughter? Her going to therapy is going to in no way affect the grandfather, except in that it might make her feel more secure in herself so she refuses to ever see the grandfather again, which she should never have to do. Yeah, you're right to be upset. Live in the US. Therapists are mandated reporters. Therapy will definitely affect dear old granddad. I think that's exactly why this son doesn't want his own child to get therapy. He's been conditioned to protect the family pedophile. In pedo families, nobody matters more than keeping the secret. I would 100% get a divorce. Do you have other children? Because if you do, then their safety is paramount. Man is a sexual predator, and your husband acts like an enabler. We have a 5-year-old boy together. Thank you for pointing that out. I agree. My girlfriend, 19/F, hurt her dog by accident and then she laughed and tried to do it again on purpose. I'm pretty horrified right now. So yeah, my girlfriend is pretty chill and I thought she was a nice person. You'll have to take my word for it that this is totally out of character. I was sitting in her garage and I should probably mention we were pretty high. She was smoking a cigarette and her dog came over. I think it's actually her brother's dog mainly, but obviously she's around the dog a lot and so is everyone else in the house. She was petting the dog and she burned him sort of under his chin. It seemed like it was an accident but she started laughing immediately after the dog yelped. He stood far away and was very wary of her after that. She called him over like, "Oh, I'm sorry, come on boy, come here." He wouldn't come. She was still laughing a little when she said to me, "If he comes back I'm totally gonna do it again." I mean, it was just so casual the way she did this and it kind of horrified me. Do you think this is like a huge red flag? Should I break up with her over this? Because I'm having trouble looking at her the same way after this happened. I was looking back on things and sometimes she is a little mean. There's a few examples but I remember we both saw this bicycle rider get hurt close up, and she was laughing when she saw it, but I thought that was just her way of dealing with seeing a traumatic thing. Now I'm starting to wonder, but I'm also really worried for that dog because I love animals and that made me feel terrible. What should I do? 20/M, by the way. If you can, tell her brother so he can decide how best to protect his dog. Someone needs to know in that family that she likes to hurt their pet. Otherwise, it could escalate and that poor dog could wind up dead, or tortured until it eventually dies years from now. And you have to decide if you could be with a person like that. Also, I get a suspicion that this isn't the first time she's hurt the dog. They are generally trusting creatures, and I feel like if it had been the first time, the dog would have come back to her even after she hurt him for comfort. That he didn't says a lot to me. That last part I was skeptical about at first, but then I remembered any time I've accidentally hurt any of my dogs, I would never do so intentionally. They come back to me to be comforted. I totally agree about telling the brother so he can keep his poor dog safe and break up with that girl. Thinking that causing harm to a pet is funny and / or intentionally hurting a pet is a massive red flag. Fucking huge. If she's willing to do something like that to an animal, who's to say she wouldn't do it to a person? Edited, typo. Deliberate cruelty to animals is a hallmark of psychopaths like serial killers, especially if they enjoy it. Run. Dog owner chiming in, please tell the dog owner about what happened. You don't have to imply that this is regular behavior on her part or anything, and in fact I wouldn't, but please protect the dog. But yeah, I don't think it was an accident the first time. You don't hold a lighted cigarette in a dog's face. And when I hurt my dogs, they might growl at me if I mash their paw real good, but they're over it a second later. They're not afraid of me. That dog was acting like he knew she would hurt him again. I think she's abusing that dog. Oh, and dump her. You can do better than an animal abuser. I would never be able to look at my partner the same if they deliberately hurt an animal or person, so I think your feelings are totally justified. And like everyone else said, tell her family. That dog shouldn't be anywhere near her. Is a sadistic streak something you want in an intimate partner?